Today we will start with a new topic, that is research methodology, right. Research. Let us start with the term research. What is research? Research is detailed and comprehensive investigation of a given topic, concern or issue, right, and it helps us in decision making, right. So, research is what? Research is comprehensive investigation, detailed investigation of a given topic. We have chosen a topic, and when we started a detailed investigation, a comprehensive investigation of that topic, right, or a concern or a issue, that is known as research, right. And why do we do this? Because it helps in decision making, right. There are the three parts involved in this comprehensive investigation. The first is implicit question posed, the explicit answer proposed, and the collection, analysis and interpretation of information leading from question to answers, right. So, there are the three parts. Research is when we do a comprehensive investigation, and there are three parts of investigation. The first is question posed, right. What is the questions, right, for which we are looking the answer, right. So, the first thing, we need a question, right. We should have something in our mind, we should have question in our mind for, right. So, the first thing about the investigation of a certain topic is the question. The third is answer proposed, right. We had a question in our mind, right. The second is we need answer proposed. What answer came to us after that investigation, and between this answer and this explicit, between this question and this explicit answer comes the collection, analysis and interpretation of information from question to answer. So, first thing, we should have a question in our mind, then as per the question in our minds or as per the objectives, we should collect the data, should analyze the data and interpret that information that leads from the question to answer, and then the third point come, that is explicit proposed answer, right. So, this is what the research is, right. What the research question is? Research question can be gleaned via observation of outside, right, past study, professional literature, or at times from peer recommendations, right. So, how a question comes in our mind? It could be through observation, it could be through peer recommendations, through literature, right, past studies, right. That research, the important thing is research should start from the appropriate question, right. The first thing about the research is when we are investigating about a topic or concern, the first thing is the question should be right, right. We should have a right question in our mind, right. So, it should start with the appropriate question. So, that research is described as methodological examination of specific subject or problem using scientific methodology, right. So, we should have an appropriate question in our mind, right, and a research begins with the appropriate question, right. Research is described as methodical examination of specific subject. We cannot research it like anyways, right. There should be a method, we should follow a procedure, a method. That examination should be methodical, right. Research is described as methodical examination about that subject, about that question, right, and we should use scientific methodologies, right. Business research generates and provides the needed quality or the quantitative information to make business judgment, including problem solving and decision making, right. Why do we need this research? We need research, right, because it provides us the qualitative and quantitative information, right. On the basis of this information, we can judge and take the decision, which helps in problem solving and can take the decision, right. A systematic approach is essential for good research. Each step must be planned so that it leads to a next step, right. Objectivity warrants the approach which is independent of research, personal views, opinion with regard to answer to the problem of investigation, right. So, what is research? Actually, research once again research is a comprehensive investigation of a topic, right, and it start with a question in the mind, and that question come from the literature review, from some observation, or from some peer recommendations, right. When some question come in our mind, we start collecting, analyzing and interpreting that data, which leads us from that answer to question, and after that we explicitly propose the answer to that question, right. This is what the research is. We have a question in our mind, right, and research is a method that we should follow to when we are researching about a topic, when we are searching about something, then we should follow the methods, right. That is that we should specifically follow the methods and use the scientific methodologies to reach to the questions, right. While we are collecting the data, while we are analyzing that information or interpreting that data, we should follow certain methods, right. A methodological approach should be followed, right, to reach to the answer, right. It is very important, and we should use certain methodologies, right, scientific methodologies, right. And then again by using, when we use a systematic approach or methodological approach and use the methodologies to reach the answer of that question, of that topic, then it helps us in decision making, there, because it provides the qualitative and quantitative type of a data which helps us in taking decisions or judgment on the basis of that data, right. And it is very important that we should follow a systematic approach in a good research, so that, and this approach should be planned in such a way that one step can lead to the another step, right. And important thing about research is that it should be independent of researcher's personal view. The objectivity is required. When you are searching about certain topic, you should have a valid question in your mind. It should be very objective, and while you are when you are proposing the answer to that question, while you are collecting the data, interpreting and analyzing that data, right, it should be very objective and should be free from or independent from the researcher's point of view or opinion, right. So, it should that the researcher's opinion should not impact the answer or the research, right. As I said, to reach to the answer, it is very important that we should follow a systematic method, research methods, right. There is a system, we should follow a systematic method to reach to the answer or to propose the answer. What is research methods, right. What is research method? Research methods are the techniques, procedures or techniques used in collecting the data or analyzing the data to reveal a new knowledge or generating a better understanding of a topic is known as research method. So, research method is what? Research methods are the procedures or techniques or the tactics, right, used in collecting and analyzing the data, right, for generating the better understanding about the topic, that is known as the research methods, right. So, what the research method? The techniques or the procedure or the technique which we use to collect the data, to analyze the data, right, that is known as the research methods. The term research method refers to the researcher's process undergoing when investigating his or her study issue, right. So, it is the procedure or a process, right. There are several research procedures, right, each of which employs a unique set of data gathering instrument. So, when preparing your approach, you will need to make a critical judgment over a different methods used in the research. Research method is what? A procedure or a techniques or a method or a technique, right, used in collecting the data, right. There are the several research procedures available, right. One can employ any of the that there are several research procedure available, and each procedure, right, has a unique set of data gathering instrument, right. So, there are several procedure and each procedure has a unique data gathering instrument, and when a researcher is preparing for the research approach, right, it is very important that the researcher need to make a critical judgment over the different method used in the research. So, there are different methods available and each method has a different instrument to collect the data. When you are opting some of the research method, it is very important that researcher should critically evaluate or critically judge over the different methods used in the research. Why you want to opt that method, right? Why not some other method, or why you are opting some methods, right? So, it is important for the researcher to critically judge the methods, one method over the other that is used in the research. Why this, why not that, right. So, it is very important for a researcher because various methods are available, right. Research methods are available, and these methods and various methods encompasses different instruments to collect the data, right. Why you want to opt one method, why not another method, it is very important for the researcher to critically analyze the thing, right. That is how do you, first is how do you collect the data? It should be qualitative or quantitative. What type of a research you want to do, that is the qualitative type of a research or the quantitative type of a research, right. How do you analyze the data, that is experimental versus descriptive. So, one should find out, critically analyze, right, one method over other, the qualitative type of a data or the quantitative type of the data, whether you want to, how do you want to analyze that data, descriptively or experimentally, right. So, research methodology is not simple about the research method, but it is to consider the logic behind using that method, right. So, methodology is not like that one has opted one of the methods, right. It is why one has opted that method, there should be a logic behind it, right. So, researcher need to identify the logic and rationality of using one approach over another, right. So, one should be very clear why one is opting for one type of a research and not another type of, one type of a method, not other type of a method, right. What are the importance of business research, right? Why do we need research, business research? That is for new ideas and insight, right. That research, that the scientific and rational thinking, and it promotes the development of logical habits of thinking and organization. The research gives us new ideas and insight, right. It develops the logical habit of thinking of organization. It helps in solving operational problem. The complex nature of the business and government has focused attention on the use of research in solving operational problems. Research provides the basis for nearly all government policies in our economic system, right. So, research is very important. Business research is, it gives us a new idea and insight. Say for example, if we want to introduce a new product, right, then research gives us a new idea and insight that what product that this product is already available in the market, how our product could be different from others, our competitors' product, right. What should be different in what is required in the market or by the customer, right. That is, how can we take the advantage, right, of our competitors, right. This provides us new ideas, insight. It helps in solving operational problems, right. At times, right, research is required, right. It provides the basis for nearly all policy making, right, or the whether in the government or in the business organization, right. It helps in solving the operational problems, right. We know then type of research, Actually, there are various types of research, and these types are based on the depth of the scope. The first type of research is exploratory research. What is this research? This research is used for preliminary investigation of subject that is not well understood or sufficiently researched. Exploring, when we are exploring something, right, as the name indicate, exploratory research, explore, right. This research is used for preliminary investigation of a subject when on a certain subject where that subject is not well understood or sufficiently researched. We want to research, we want to search more about that topic or that thing, that is known as exploratory research. We want to explore more about that topic, right. That is the topic or the problem that is not yet well understood, that topic is not well understood or sufficiently researched. Even if well understood, not sufficiently researched, then that is known as exploratory research. It serves to establish a framework of reference and the hypothesis from which an in-depth study can be developed, and it will enable a conclusive results to be generated, right. So, this exploratory research actually serves to establish a frame of reference and the hypothesis. It serves as a frame of reference, right, frame of reference for others, and in this the hypothesis, we create a hypothesis in this, and a hypothesis from which an in-depth study can be developed. We frame a hypothesis. Hypothesis is what? A well educated guesses hypothesis, because that topic is not well investigated or sufficiently researched or understood. So, we frame some hypothesis and we do a in-depth study, right, and that is, we frame the hypothesis from which an in-depth study can be developed, and that will enable us to generate a conclusive result, right, and it serves to establish a framework of reference. This type of exploratory research serves to establish a frame of reference, and in this we use the hypothesis method, and which this hypothesis method actually helps us in depth study that can be developed, and we can reach to a conclusion, right. Exploratory research is based on the study of little studied phenomenon or subject. It relies less on theories and more on collection of data to identify the pattern that explain the phenomenon, right, because it is exploratory research, and it is that topic or that phenomenon is little that phenomenon or that research is based on the little studied phenomenon, right. That topic was not studied well, right, not much has been done on that topic. That topic was not well researched, that nothing much was done on that topic. So, it relies less on theories, right, because no one know much about that topic. So, that it relies less on theories because of less availability of the theories, because that topic was less researched, and it relies more on the collection of data to identify the pattern that explain this phenomenon. So, they try to collect the data, right, so that they can explain, they can identify the pattern and explains the phenomenon, right. That is investigation on the role of social media in perception of self-image. There could be many exploratory research. So, exploratory research is when we choose a topic which is not well understood or not well researched, much research not has been done on that topic, that is known as the exploratory research, right. That is known as the exploratory research, and this type of research, because it is not well investigated or not much research has been done on that. So, it relies more on the collection of data rather than on the theories, and it gives, this exploratory research gives a reference, frame of reference. This exploratory research makes a frame of reference, right, frame of reference, and is based on the hypothesis, right, because on hypothesis we can make certain guesses and we collect the data, we can make the certain guesses, and this hypothesis based research helps us to reach to a conclusive results, right. So, that is exploratory research. Another type of research is descriptive research. What is descriptive research? Descriptive research defines the characteristics of a particular phenomenon without necessarily investigating the causes that produce it, right. So, descriptive result is what? It defines the characteristics of a particular phenomenon. Description, it describes the characteristics of a particular phenomenon without necessarily investigating the causes that produces it, right. The descriptive research design involves the observing and collecting data on a given topic without attempting to infer cause and effect relationship. The goal of descriptive research is to provide a comprehensive and accurate picture of the population or phenomenon being studied and to describe a relationship pattern and trend that exist within the data, right. So, descriptive research is what? Descriptive research describe the characteristics of that particular phenomena without going into details, the causes, without knowing the reason or the causes for that particular phenomenon or characteristics for those particular characteristics, that is known as descriptive research. It describes the characteristics of a particular phenomenon without actually make any attempt to infer the cause and effect relationship, right, without investigating the reasons or causes that produces those particular characteristics. Without knowing the reasons for those particular characteristics, it defines the characteristics of a particular phenomenon. The research design, the descriptive research design, right, it involves the observing the data, collecting the data, right, without attempting to infer the cause effect relationship. What are the reason, what is the reason for those characteristics, right, cause relation, that is the cause and effect relationship. Then what is the goal of this type of the research? Descriptive research, right. The goal of this type of a research is to provide a comprehensive and accurate picture of that particular phenomenon or a population being studied, right. It gives the descriptive pictures or the comprehensive and accurate picture of phenomenon under study, right, and to describe the relationship patterns and trend that exist within the data. We do not know the reason for that relationship pattern, but it describe the relationship or the pattern or the trend that exists within the data. That is the descriptive research. Another type of a research is explanatory research, right. Explanatory is the most common type of research method and is responsible for establishing a cause and effect relationship, right, that allows generalization and extended to the similar realities. It is closely related to the descriptive research, although it provides the additional information about the observed object and its interaction with the environment. So, explanatory research is what? Explanatory research is that type of a research method which is responsible for establishing the cause and effect relationship, right. And because it explains the cause and effect relationship, right. So, it allows to generalize the similar realities, right. It is closely related to the descriptive research, but it provides the additional information about the observed object and its interaction with the environment, right. So, explanatory research, as the name indicates, explanatory research, it tries to explain the relationship, the cause and effect relationship, right, and on the basis of this type of a research we can generalize the findings, right, and it is a type of a descriptive research, but it provides the additional information about the object under study or the subject under study and its information about the object and its interaction with the environment, that is the impact of environment on the object or the impact of object on the environment, right, that is known as the explanatory research, right. So, we discussed about three type of researches, that is exploratory research, descriptive research and explanatory research. Then the correlation research, the third type of research is correlation research, right. The purpose of this type of scientific research is to identify the relationship between two or more than two variables, right. A correlation study aims to determine whether a variable change, right, whether a variable change, how much the other elements of the system changes or observed system changes. This is a correlation, that is this type of a study try to find out the relationship between two or more variable. If there is any change in the one variable, will it impact the another variable, and if it impacts the other variables, right, how much the other elements will change or how much will it impact the other variable, that is known as correlation search. So, we discussed about three types of researches on the depth of scope, that is the exploratory research. Exploratory research exploratory research is conducted on those topics, right, or on those topics or the subject which are not well understood or not sufficiently researched, right. Those are known as exploratory research, and exploratory research gives a framework for the references, and it works on the hypothesis rather than working on the established theories, right. It tries to collect the data and analyze that data, and it works as a framework of reference, right. And then descriptive research actually describes the characteristics of a certain phenomena without describing the reason or the cause of those characteristics, that is known as the descriptive research. It portrays the exact it provides the comprehensive and the accurate picture of the phenomenon under study, the relationships, phenomenon under study, about the population being studied and being studied to describe the relationship, pattern and trend that exist within the data, right. So, it describes the characteristics of that particular phenomenon without going into detail of the cause of that relationship, while explanatory research is like a descriptive research, but it go beyond that, right. It tries to explain the reasons, the cause and effect relationship between the phenomenon and other objects and the environment, that is explanatory research. Then the correlation research, that is if there is any relationship between two or more than two variables and a change in one variable, will it impact the change in one variable, whether it impacts the other variable, and if it impacts the other variable, how much will it impact the other variables, that is the correlation research, right. Steps for the research process. Research is there are because it is very important that we should conduct the research, right. There is a method for research and we should follow that methods, right. For the research, the first is the research process is a roadmap for a researcher, and it gives an overview of researcher's journey. Research must have clarified two critical questions. First, what research questions answer you are finding, and after deciding the research question, second question is how do you find out the research questions answer. So, the first step of the first step is question in the mind of the researcher, right? What research questions answer you are finding? Question posed. What is the question in the mind of researcher for which the researcher is looking answer? For which question the researcher is looking the answer for the question, right? So, one should have a right question in the mind. So, the first step is that what is the question what is the question, right? So, one should have a research question in the mind, right? The research questions answer you are finding, right? So, the question, research question should be there, right? The second is, how do you find the answer of that question? First is, you should have a question in your mind. The second question which should come in the mind of the researcher is, how will you find the answer of that question? Right. So, how do you find the research questions answer? Then research methodology is process of determining the answer to the research question. First is, researcher has a question in the mind. This is the question for which I am looking the answer. I am looking for the answer of this question, right, which is in my mind. How will I find the answer to this question? Then the answer to this question is research methodology. A research methodology is a process of determining the answer to the research question, the first question in the mind. So, research methodology, how will you find the answer to that question? Through research methodology, I will try to find the answer to my research question. So, first thing is, the first step is that you should have a valid research question in your mind, then you should follow the research methodology to find out the answer to that question, right. So, to get the answer of the question, that researcher must go through a series of experimental stages in the research process, right. There is the sequence of steps, like one should go, right, go through to get the answer of the question. The first step is define the research problem, right. First is to define the research problem. You should have a valid question in your mind, right. Question should be valid, relevant question for which you are looking an answer, right. First is that. Second is, the second step then follows, how will you find the answer of those questions, right. Then again it research methodology, the first step is review of literature, right. So, it is important to go through the concepts and theories related to that topic, review the concepts, review the theories related to that topic, right. Then second is, in the review literature, you go through the theories and the concepts related to that question or the topic, and review the papers or the research findings, right, related to that or relevant to that topic or finding, right. This is known as review of literature, that you should go through the literature related to that topic. That literature could be theories, that literature could be concept, that literature could be research findings done by the other, research done by the others. So, first step is, after having a question in your mind, the first question is, that's the thing is, go through the literature, review of literature. Going through the review of literature, you will get the answer of many of the question, and it will help you to frame their objectives and hypothesis clearly. Then after that, going through the literature review, formulate your hypothesis, means formulate your objective concretely, precisely. See, first is, you have a vague question in your mind, right. You might having a question in your mind, you wanted to know about something, then you have gone through the concept, through the theories, through the research finding, then you can concretely came to know the objectives, what I really want to know about research about, right. Frame the objective, literature review. The third point is, after literature review, is frame the objectives and the hypothesis, right. When you frame the objective, right? Then frame the hypothesis, objectives and hypothesis. Third is part is that. Then fourth is designing the research, right? That is it is important, right? Designing the research means now you have framed the objectives and hypothesis, you know what you want to, what are the objective of your research, what are the objective means questions of your research, and you made the hypothesis, right, and to find out the answers of your questions. Then design the research means means it includes many things. Designing the research includes many things, that is you will have to decide the population, right, population under study, right. Then it is, then again in research design comes the sample size, right, then the sample design, right, how will you design, what type of this sample will you collect, whether you will collect the probabilities, what type of a method will you opt to collect this sample, the probability sample or the non probability sample, what will be the sample design, right. Then what all instrument, then comes the collecting the data, then what all instrument will you use to collect the data, then after that collection of data comes, right, using the instrument could be, there are many instruments which we will discuss later on, the interview, observation method or questionnaires, right. There are various type of questionnaires through research design, and you decide all these things in during the time of research design. Then after designing the research, one start collecting the data, right, as per the requirements, as per the objectives, that is known as collection of the data. We start collecting the data. After collecting the data, people start analyzing the data, right. Analyzing the data means what? We have collected the data. Now after collecting the data, we started tabulating the data. We use various research methodologies to analyze the data, right, depending on the objective and the hypothesis, right. Then analyzing the data, after analysis of the data comes the interpretation and the report, right. Then we interpret the things, and on the basis of that we interpret the things, and finally we make a report, right, we make a report of that, right. So these are the steps to be followed to carry out the research, right. The first step is one should have a valid question in the mind. Second is go through the literature related to that topic. Then concretely frame your objectives and hypotheses. Then design your methods, research design, right, design your research. Designing the research is very complicated and complex task, right. One should pay much attention to this at this stage. Then collect the data, right, analyze the data and interpret the data and make a report on that, right. A research problem, the first step is the research problem, defining a research problem. Research problem is what? Research problem is the question that researcher want to be answered, or the researcher is looking answer for, right. It could be any assumption, assertion researcher wish to examine or investigate, may be turned into research topic or study subject. That is a research question which is in the mind of the researcher. It could be it is the question the researcher want to be answered or looking the answer for, right. The problem involve the area of concern to the researcher, for condition they want to improve, difficult they want to eliminate, question for which they are seeking the answer. So research problem could be related to anything, right. Research problem is what? Research problem is statement of information needed by the decision maker to help to solve a management decision problem. Research problem is actually it is a statement of information needed by a decision maker to help solve a management decision problem. So that it is very important that the research problem should be should be in form of a concrete statement. So, research problem is a statement of information, right, needed by the decision maker to help to solve the management decision problem, right. It is a statement for the problem for which we are looking a solution, right. That is the research problem. While defining the research problem, it is very important to keep certain things in mind, right. First is the right question must be addressed if research is aid decision maker, right. So, the first is that question should be right. You cannot take up any of the question and I want to do research on that. No, the right question must be addressed if research is aid to decision makers, right. Very often in research problem, we have a tendency to rationalize and defend our action once we embarked upon a particular research plan. The best time to review and consider the alternative approaches is in the planning stage. If this is done, needless cost of false start and redoing the work could be avoided, right. So, the first step is actually the question should be valid. The right question should be addressed. At times we take up the questions and then we have a tendency to rationalize and defend our action that this question is right, this research problem is statement is correct, this research problem is good, this this is the right question. No, no. It is very important to review. The best time to review and consider the alternative approach is at the time of planning, because again if we will do it at the time of planning, right, then it will avoid the needless cost of false start or redoing the work again, because we need the answer for that particular specific question which helps us to solve the problem, right. So, the first step is that you should have a valid question in your mind. The right question must be addressed, right. Don't take up any of the question and don't try to defend the question. If required, try to find out the right question, revise your question, right, at the time of the planning stage only, otherwise your research will go into vain, right. Okay. A good starting point in problem definition is to ask whether the decision maker would like to know if requested information could be obtained without error and without cost, right. So, the first thing is decision maker would like to know if requested information could be obtained without error and without cost. Is it of any use to decision maker, right. Will it help the decision maker? Never settle on the particular approach without developing and considering at least one alternative, right. So, first question is, will the decision maker buy that, right, would like to know the answer of that question and never settle on one approach, right. It is very important that you should develop another alternative, right. That is the thing, right. Consideration in selecting the research problem, right. So, research problem, that one should have a valid question in the mind which should help the researcher decision maker, right. While a researcher is selecting a research problem, right, it is very important that few things should be considered, right. Interest. The primary criteria for selecting the topic or problem, right, because the study journey entails many more difficulties, time consuming, unforeseen problems. So, if the study problem does not capture the researcher's attention, it won't be easy to maintain the same level of motivation and interest for the entire research time frame, right. See, research is not that easy, it is time consuming, right, and we invest resources in that. So, it is very important we should select a topic of our interest, because researcher encounters many unforeseen problems, right. That researcher can encounters many problems, right, at the time of the research. It won't be easy for the researcher to maintain the same level of motivation, right, at all the time if topic is not of the interest of the researcher. So, it is very important that the research topic should be of the interest of the researcher. Second is magnitude. The researcher must have a good knowledge about the research process, so they can correctly visualize the task involved related to proposed study. That is, researcher should be knowledgeable enough, right, should have knowledge about the research process, so that the researcher can correctly visualize the task involved related to proposed studies, so that they should know the task or the steps involved in the study, right. That researcher should be knowledgeable enough, right. Then third consideration is measurement of concept. While using any concept in your study, make its indicator and measurement clear, right. For example, an investigator wants to measure the effectiveness of the health promotion program, right. So, before starting the research work, it must be clear about what determines and how they measure it, right. So, before starting, first is interest, second is knowledgeable, third is measurement concept. Measurement concept means how will you collect the data, right. It should be very important, right. While using any of the concept in these studies, right, it should be very important that how will you measure that concept, how will you collect the data concept, right. That it is important to while you are using any of the concept in this study, make its indicator and measurement clear, right. How will you measure that data or concept, how will you measure that concept, what are the indicators of that concept, it should be very clear, right. Suppose if someone wants to measure the level of stress of an individual, it should be very important that they should be well versed with the indicator and the measurement, how will they measure the level of stress of an individual, right. Then the level of expertise, right. As a researcher, one should ensure that they have a proper knowledge or expertise for the proposed task, right. They should have a knowledge about the topic, right. Whatever topic they have suggested, they should have knowledge about that proper proposed task. It is very important that the level of expertise should be there. And the next is relevance. The researcher should make sure that the research topic has relevance in terms of profession, right, gives value to the current value of knowledge and act as a bridge between the existing knowledge, right. So, it should bridge the research gap. So, your topic should be, your research topic should bridge the research gap, right. What the people already know and what they should know, that it should bridge the current research gap, right, and that topic has a relevance in terms of the profession and should add on the knowledge, right, knowledge base of the individual as well as of the industry and others. So, these are the characteristics which one should consider before taking up the research problem, right. Okay. So, steps in formulating the research problem, first is identification of the broad subject area according to the interest, right. So, first is it is actually important to identify the broad subject area, right, on what would be the subject area, broader area, right, on which you want to work as per the interest of the researcher, right. Second is separate the broad areas into sub areas. Suppose area is if one wants to know about, suppose if broad area means it could be related to say consumer behavior, it could be related to some HR profession, it could be related to some recruitment process, it could be related to say some training process. So, broad area, it is the broader areas, then these broader areas can be divided into sub areas. It is important that separate the broad areas into sub areas and select one sub area or areas that is perceived to be most as per the interest, most in interest, right. So, one should be first thing is that you should have idea about the broader area, then divide that broader areas into sub areas, and from those sub areas choose the topic of your interest, right. Raise a question and list out all possible question that comes in the mind, and if listed question is too many for manageable perspective, then follow the step 1 and 3, right. So, after selecting the sub areas of the interest, right, frame out the question, right, list out all the possible question that comes in the mind, right. Then after that, once it has been selected that this is the question that I want to know the stress level of say manager level of in banking sector, or I want to know the impact of the training process, right, say impact of the training process at junior levels in particular in that particular industry, right. That could be the impact of the social media or impact the role that social media plays in managing the in managing people or the perception of the people, right. So, these could be the questions which comes in the mind, right. Then on the basis of the questions frame the objectives and the sub objective which depends on the research questions, right. So, you have framed you have selected area and you jotted down the questions which came into the mind, right. Then on the basis of that formulate the research objectives and sub objectives, right. Then evaluate the objective viability in light of human, time and financial resources, right. Formulate the research objective. Once formulated the objectives and sub objective, then again it is very important that evaluate those objectives. On what basis? Evaluate those objectives on the basis of time, right. How much time will it take? Do you have that much time? On the basis of financial resources, right. Do you have those financial resources? Would you be able, right. That is the cost feasibility. Do the feasibility, that is the time feasibility, cost feasibility. Then the human, would you be able to collect the data and how much resources, human resources would you require to collect the data and analyze the data on the basis of human resources, right. So, evaluate the objectives on various criteria, right. Then formulating a research problem can be divided in two activities. After this that is research problem, we can formulate the research problem, and this activity can be divided into two activities, that is identification or selection of research problem and formulation of research problem, right. That is identification or selection of research problem. So, the first step is identification or selection of research problem is that is the it involves the identification of few problems and selection one out of them after evaluating the alternatives against certain selected criterias, right. So, one should have more than one research problems, right, and one should choose one, right, out of all those problems, problems on the basis of what? On the basis of evaluation on certain criteria. Right, there are different sources from which researcher can find the research problems. Right, you can find out the research problem from various sources, like through reading, academic experiences, daily experiences, exposure to field situation, brainstorming, intuitions, consultations. All these are the ways from which one can get the research. These could be sources for the research problem, right? They are the different, one can find the research problem from the various sources, right? So, it is very important to identify the or selection of the research problem, right. So, identify the problems, many problems, right, many problems, and select one of them on the basis of the criteria, certain criterias. What is the criteria of selection, right? You have framed many, you have identified many research problem, right? On what criteria you are selecting one, that is first is the internal or personal criteria, right, like researcher interest. It could be the criteria, could be the researcher's interest, it could be the competency of the researcher, resources of the researcher like finance and the time. Then criteria could be the external criteria factor, like researchability of the problem, right, whether it is possible to research about that problem, would we be able to get the data, collect the data, importance and urgency of the problem, how important that research problem is, right, urgency of the problem, novelty of the problem, feasibility, is it feasible to carry out research, then the facilities, usefulness of the problem, social relevance and the research personnel required. So, these are the external criteria. On the basis of these criteria, we select the most appropriate research problem, right. So, this is identification of the research problem. After identification of the research problem is formulation of the research problem, right. So, we have identified the problem, right. Now, formulation of the research problem. Formulation is a process of refining the research idea into research question or objective. We have a in identification of a research problem, we have a broader idea on what we want to do a research, right. Now, this formulation of research problem is we give a statement for that research problem, right. It is a process of refining. Actually, research formulation of research problem is what? Formulation of the research ideas into research questions or objective, right. We had certain research ideas in our mind, and now we are formulating or refining those research ideas into research questions or objectives, right. It means translating and transforming the selected research problem, topic, idea into scientifically researchable question, right. So, we are transforming the topic into researchable question, that is formulating. It is concerned with specifying exactly what the research problem is. Essentially, two steps are involved in formulating the research problem. First is understanding the problem thoroughly, and the second is expressing the problem in more specific terms and more clear, right. So, while doing that research problem, right, there are two steps involved in the research formulation: understanding the problem thoroughly. This is the most important way of understanding the problem, is discussion with colleague, right, experts, right, and the problem is also studied using the literature survey. After understanding the problem, it is expressed in the more specific term to make the problem clear. So, understanding the problem thoroughly and then expressing the problem in more specific terms or more clear, right, that is precise. Then it is important that the problem statement should be precise, right, clear, concise, statement of question or issue that is to be investigated within the goal of finding an answer or solution. So, first is it is very important during the formulation of the problem, that is in while we were formulating the hypothesis and objectives, right. So, it is important that that you should have a understanding of the problem thoroughly and express the problem in the specific terms, right. So, these two steps are involved. And how can understand the problem thoroughly? We can understand the problem thoroughly, right, by through literature review, discussions with the colleagues or the experts, right. We come to know about the problems thoroughly, right. It helps us to, it gives us an idea about the objective. Then after going through this step, the second step comes is expressing the problem in a concise, precise and a clear form, right. A clear statement of question or issues to be investigated within the goal or finding to answer the questions, right. Okay, characteristics of a good research questions, right. While we are formulating the questions, right, when we are formulating the research questions or the research problem, there are certain characteristics of a good research problems or the questions. We will discuss about it in our next lecture. Till then, namaskar. Thank you very much.